Hey y'all, Big Tim here. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Old School and Bass with Big Tim. Today I'm going to show you how to tie a couple of knots. I know I've already shown you how to tie the Palomar, but we're going to go over it again because we're going to use a couple of different colored lines. We've got some Power Pro in yellow for braid, so that should hopefully make it easier to see. This is 40-pound yellow Power Pro, and then some 17-pound green Sufix. I know 17's pretty heavy, but I wanted it to be able to show. And hopefully, when we do a GoPro footage, I'm actually going to strap on the chest cam, and we'll be able to see this a little bit better behind a black background. So, let's get started. The first knot we're going to tie is a Palomar knot.
What you do want to do is double the line up. Make sure you give yourself enough to tie. And take the point that you just made and run it through the hook eye. Okay? Then what you do is just overhand loop it, bring the double tag around, make a knot, then this double tag that we've got, it's a little harder to do with braid, and then you run your hook through that tag loop. This is where I normally put it in my mouth to cinch it. You pull everything tight. And that's a Palomar knot. Pretty simple knot. It's what I use for most everything that is running on the bottom. Jig, worm, anything like that. The next knot that I use is a clinch knot. Now the clinch knot I generally use on spinner baits and crankbaits, larger lures, stuff like that. It's real simple. Run it through the back of the hook and then loop it back around itself. Okay, so basically you got 3 lines. And then just start wrapping it around itself 5 times. Okay. Then you can bring this back up through that loop that you made. And then if you want to do an improved clinch, you bring that tag back around through there. And I realize I may need to do that again. But there's your clinch knot.
Now, one thing I wanted to show you, I did cut the point of this hook off because I didn't want to get stuck. For this demonstration right here, this is one of the issues with braided line and the majority of hooks. This is a perfectly brand new hook other than me pulling the point off of it. Look at that. Right here, that isn't welded. So unless you're using a welded eye hook, you're apt to have this problem where it came through there. There's our knot. You know, it's still intact. Of course, when we pull it, it'll go back. But that is a problem with braid because it's so thin that it folds right in the gap of that hook eye. So this is where another knot comes in handy. If you're using braid, particularly a flip width, because I've had this happen, you know, you'll catch a fish, set the hook, and come back with nothing. You know, the knot's on there, and you're like, what happened? Well, the bottom line is somehow or another you set the hook and tore the line through that little part of the hook. This is where a snell knot comes into play. And I don't use this very often, but like if you're going to Florida, you're fishing braided line with heavy weights, or honestly, if you're fishing braid at all, you probably need to use a snell hook.
Alright, so the first thing you want to do is take your hook with the hook point turned up, and you run your braided line down through the front of the hook. I consider this at the front of the hook, the business end. So then you just bring yourself enough line to make the knot, and you wrap it back over itself like this. It's a lot easier when you have it inside the hook like that. Then you take the tag and wrap it around itself 5 or 6 times. Okay? Then you take your tag line and you run it through that big loop that you made up toward the hook eye. And you bring it back down through the big loop that you made down at the hook point. And then you just pull your main line and start snugging it all up. Now you have a snell knot.
And another benefit, I didn't put a sinker on here, but another big benefit is when you set the hook, that hook is always going to pop straight up. Doing, 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 just like that. So you can always tie a snell knot with fluorocarbon or monofilament. It's a lot more difficult because it's thicker line. But, you know, if you can handle it, by all means, do it. It's a really good knot, and it helps get a good hook set right at the top of the mouth. So a snell knot is another one that I use occasionally. Another knot that I use is the blood knot. This is for tying a leader onto your braided line. If you're using braid for a main line, and we'll pretend this is fluorocarbon, but we're going to use monofilament because I had it laying around and it's fairly thick, and hopefully we can see it pretty easily.
The next knot that we're going to do is the blood knot. The yellow braided line will be our main line to our rod and reel, and this will be our fluorocarbon leader, even though it is mono. What you want to do is parallel the lines. Okay? Pinch the ends of them, and what I do is I start wrapping the braid around the mono 6 times. On the 6th time, I come over here and pinch, and then continue the process again. We're making a loop right there in the middle. Then we take our tag end of braid and run it through the loop that we have at our fingers, through the back side. And then we take the tag end of the mono or braid and run it through the front of the very same loop. Okay, that's the way the knot will look. Okay, from there I normally take the 2 tag ends and hold them in my teeth, but since we don't have the ability to do that for this video, I'm just showing you what happens. You pull it tight, and there's your knot. If you make it properly, the tags will be facing opposite each other. But it's a fantastic knot. It's super strong. Shouldn't have any breakage with it.
Well, with these 4 knots, you should be ready to tackle anything that you want to imagine doing in fishing. I generally use the Palomar knot for anything like a worm or a jig, anything that I'm bouncing off the bottom. And I use the clinch knot for larger lures and crankbaits particularly, just because, you know, you got all those hooks and it's just kind of hard to pass a crankbait and make a Palomar knot. Spinnerbaits, crankbaits, topwaters, that's what I use the clinch knot for. And the bud knot is for attaching a leader to braided line. And the snell knot is for use with braided line anytime you might be flipping or something like that. You know, the snell knot really comes into play with that. So I hope you learned a little something today. Take these tips out with you next time you go fishing. Hopefully you'll catch more fish. Again, this is Big Tim. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.